Nora Voss put $15 on that counter like it was already gone, because to her, it was. Not because she had money to spare. She hadn't eaten since yesterday morning, and the coins she'd just laid down were the last of what her mother had sewn into the hem of her traveling coat before she died. But she had seen something in the back corner of that saloon that she could not walk past and still be the person she was. The room went quiet when the money hit the wood. Decker Hale looked up from it, then looked at her, then looked at the man on the floor with his wrists roped to the post. And in the silence between those looks, something shifted in the room the way a room shifts when someone does the thing nobody expected, and now nobody knows what comes next. The town of Creed's Hollow sat at the bottom of a canyon that had no particular reason to exist except that the silver mines 4 miles north needed somewhere to put their men on weekends, and men in that condition needed saloons, and saloons needed someone to keep them from burning down entirely. Decker Hale filled that role. He was broad-shouldered, past 50, with a red beard gone gray at the edges and eyes that didn't match his smile. His smile was generous. His eyes were the kind that counted things. Nora had ridden into Creed's Hollow 3 hours ago, on a horse she'd borrowed from a ranch outside of Abilene without asking, which was a thing she wasn't proud of. But the horse was still there, tied to the hitching post, and she intended to give it back, so she preferred not to use the word stolen. She'd been looking for her brother. Thomas had been writing her letters for 8 months from a mining camp north of here, steady and regular, and then the letters stopped. Not slowed, stopped. The last one said he owed a man named Decker Hale $60 for a debt he didn't quite explain, and that things would be fine, and that she shouldn't worry. She had worried. She had ridden 400 miles. The man roped to the post in the corner of the saloon was Thomas Voss. He was 23 years old and looked 40. His right eye was swollen shut, and he was holding himself at an angle that told her his ribs weren't right. He'd looked at her when she walked in, and the look on his face was the worst thing she'd seen since their mother's last week. Not relief, not hope, recognition, and then shame, and then the very specific terror of someone who knows that the person they love has just stepped into the same trap they're in. Nora had $15. Thomas owed $60. She put the 15 on the counter anyway. Decker Hale counted it with one finger, touching each coin deliberately. Then he looked up at her with his generous smile. "That's not 60, he said. "I know," Nora said. "It's what I have." She kept her voice flat because flat was the only option she had. Her hands were not flat. Her hands she kept still by force. "I want to negotiate the rest." Hale studied her. He had the patient look of a man who has more time than the people who need something from him, and who knows it. Around them, the saloon had not quite resumed its noise. Men were listening in the way men listen when a woman walks into a room she has no business being in, and does not appear to know that. "Negotiate with what?" he said. "With what I know," Nora said. "About Harlan Creed." The saloon went a different kind of quiet. The first quiet had been surprise. This one was something else. Decker Hale's generous smile did not move, but something behind it did. "That's a name," he said carefully, "that I'd be thoughtful about using in public." "Then let's not use it in public," Nora said. She held his gaze. "I have a letter. My brother wrote it 8 months ago. It names Harlan Creed as a silent partner in your operation here, and in 3 others along this corridor, including the assay office in Whitmore Junction, which is processing ore weights for mines he doesn't legally own." She paused. "The letter is not on me." "It's somewhere you won't find it without my help." Another pause. "My brother walks out of here today, and you get the letter. Or I ride to the federal marshal's office in Colton, and I have a very long conversation." Hale was quiet for 4 full seconds. It was the loudest 4 seconds Nora had ever sat through. Then he reached under the counter and came up with a ring of keys and held them out to the man nearest the post. "Cut him loose," he said. His voice had not changed. His smile had not changed. But his eyes had done the thing she'd been watching for: the calculation, the recalibration, the reluctant arithmetic of a man deciding that $60 was not worth what she was describing. Thomas came across the room, slowly, holding his ribs. When he reached Nora, she took his arm without looking at him, because if she looked at his face right now, she would lose the flat voice, and she could not afford that yet. Decker Hale watched them leave. At the door, he said, "That letter better be everything you say it is, Miss Voss." She pushed through the door without answering. Outside, the afternoon sun hit her like a weight. Thomas was leaning on her by the time they reached the horses, And the horse she'd borrowed from outside Abilene was exactly where she'd left it, patient and indifferent, which was more than she could say for anything else. "You shouldn't have come," Thomas said. "I know," she said. She helped him into the saddle. "Hold on. Where are we going?" "Away from here," she said. "First. Then we'll figure out the rest." She had not been entirely honest with Decker Hale. She had a letter, Thomas's last letter, the one she'd read 40 times on the road east, but it did not name Harlan Creed specifically. It named initials, HC, and a partial description of the arrangement. Enough to suggest, not enough to prove. She had gambled that Decker Hale was not a man who took risks with even suggestions. She had been right. She would need to be right about several more things before this was finished. They made it 6 miles north of Creed's Hollow before Thomas's horse went lame on a cut stone. And they stopped at the first water. They found a shallow creek running fast and cold between 2 red rock walls. Nora got Thomas down, got him seated, and stood for a moment looking at the lame horse and the setting sun and the general shape of their situation, which was not good. "Thomas," she said, "what exactly did you see?" He didn't answer right away. He was looking at his hands, which were shaking slightly in the way hands shake after they've been held in one position too long. "I was in the assay office," he said, "in Whitmore Junction. I was waiting to have my sample weighed. I'd found a good vein, Nora, I really had, and the door to the back room wasn't closed all the way." He stopped. 2 men in there. One was the assay clerk. The other one, I didn't recognize then, but I recognized the name later. Harlan Creed. He owns the Creed family land grants through here. Half the mineral rights in this canyon are registered to him. She absorbed this. And they were talking about weight records, Thomas said. The clerk was keeping 2 sets. The official ones that went to the mine owners, showing lower yields. And the real ones. The difference went to Creed. He paused. "It's not small money, Nora. We're talking years of it. Every mine along the South Fork." He looked up at her. "I wrote it down. Everything I heard. I put it in my second letter, and I sent it to you before Hale's men came for me. Did you get it?" She stared at him. "The second letter? The one after the last one you must have gotten. I sent 2 in the same week." "Thomas." He read her face. "You never got it?" "No." He looked at the creek for a long moment. "It has names," he said. "Dates. Specific weight records I'd memorized from what I saw through the door. If that letter went to you, and you never got it," he stopped. "Someone intercepted it," Nora said. "Or it's sitting in a mail depot somewhere," Thomas said. But his voice said he didn't believe that. Nora sat down on the rock beside him. She looked at the creek, which didn't have any advice to offer. The red walls above them were going orange in the last light. The lame horse was drinking, unbothered. She had ridden 400 miles to find a brother. She had walked into a saloon and bluffed a dangerous man with a partial letter and the kind of confidence that only works when you have nothing left to lose. She had gotten Thomas free, and now she understood that getting Thomas free was not the same as being finished. Harlan Creed did not know her name yet. Decker Hale knew it. And Decker Hale was not a man who let things rest when money was involved. "We need to move," she said. "Not just tonight. We need to get to Colton." Thomas looked at her. "The federal marshal. Thomas, what you memorized, do you still have it?" She watched him close his eyes and think. When he opened them, something had sharpened in his face despite the swollen eye, despite the ribs. He had the Voss look, their mother's look, the one that meant they were going to do the thing, even if the thing was hard. "Every number," he said. "I still have every number." "Good," she said. "Start reciting. I'll write it down." She had paper in the saddlebag. She had a stub of pencil. She wrote, while Thomas talked, mine designations, date ranges, weight discrepancies, the clerk's name, the description of the second ledger, the room where Creed and the clerk had spoken. He was precise in the way that people are precise when they've been rehearsing something in their heads for the months they've been roped to a post with nothing else to think about. When he finished, Nora had 3 pages covered front and back. She folded them, wrapped them in the oilskin from her pack, and tucked them into the inner pocket of her coat. "If anything happens to me," she said, "you take those pages to Colton. Nothing's going to happen to you, Thomas." He looked at her. "Nothing's going to happen to you," he said again, quieter. "I've watched you walk into rooms you had no business walking into since you were 12 years old, and you've walked out of every single one. She almost said something to that. She stopped herself. There was no time for the things she would have said. They walked the horses through the dark, Thomas on the lame one at a slow lead, Nora on the borrowed one. The trail north was narrow, and the canyon walls blocked the moon until nearly midnight. And then, the moon came through all at once, and lit the rock pale and cold, and very beautiful. They made camp in a hollow under an overhang. Nora built a fire small and covered, and got water boiling. She had dried meat and hardtack, the same provisions. It struck her that any person running from something in this part of the country seemed to end up with, and she split it evenly, and gave Thomas the slightly larger share, without making it a thing. She sat across the fire from him, and watched him eat, and thought about the 3 pages in her coat, and the name Harlan Creed, and the assay office in Whitmore Junction, and the distance to Colton, which was 2 days' ride south. Maybe 1.5, if they pushed. What she was thinking about, underneath all of that, the thing she kept moving away from and returning to like a tongue on a sore tooth, was the look on Decker Hale's face when she'd said Harlan Creed's name. Not surprise, not guilt, just calculation. The look of a man who had already war-gamed this exact conversation and had a next move prepared. She had beaten his first move. She had not beaten his second one. She didn't know yet what his second one was. "Thomas," she said. He looked at her over his tin cup. "Who knows you're here?" As in, who knew where Hale was keeping you? He thought about it. The men who brought me in. The girl who worked the morning shift at the saloon she used to bring water sometimes. A man named Ord who ran supplies between the hollow and the mines. The girl, does she know your name? She knows Thomas. She doesn't know the rest. Nora turned this over. Does Ord know about Harlan Creed? Thomas looked at the fire. Ord knows everything about everything, he said. He's been running supplies in this canyon for 15 years. Men talk in front of supply runners the same way they talk in front of cleaning women. They figure you're just part of the furniture. He said it without irony. But Nora heard the thing underneath it, the same thing she'd heard her whole life, in a different form. People's habit of looking past the women and the workers and the runners, the way that habit got used against them. Does Ord know where you're from? Does he know you have a sister? Thomas went still. He wrote back. He said slowly. When I sent the letters, to confirm they'd gone out, he was the one who he stopped. He's the one who would know if a letter was intercepted. Yeah, Thomas said. He's the one who would know. They didn't sleep much. Before dawn, Nora was on her feet, and the fire was down to coals. She had made a decision in the dark, the same way she made most of her decisions, not impulsively, not reluctantly, but with the patient arithmetic of someone who had been handling her own problems since she was 16, and had learned that the longer you waited to commit, the worse your options got. She couldn't ride straight to Colton. 2 riders on a clear trail, 1 horse going lame, were easy to follow. And if Ord was Hale's informant, if Ord had intercepted Thomas's second letter, then Hale already knew there was documentation. He'd let them walk out of the saloon because a public confrontation was expensive. A quiet one, on a remote trail, was something else. What she needed was corroboration, the testimony of 2 witnesses instead of 1. She needed Ord, not to threaten him, not to expose him. She needed Ord to understand that his best option, the only option that didn't end with him answering for a 15-year conspiracy, was to come to Colton voluntarily and say what he knew. Thomas thought this was dangerous. He said so twice, and both times Nora heard him, and both times she agreed with him, and both times she told him she was doing it anyway, because it was the only play that worked. That's the worst reason to do something, Thomas said. I know, she said. I've been doing things for the worst reasons since you were old enough to get yourself roped to a post. He was quiet for a moment. You're exactly like her, he said. Their mother. Not a complaint, just a recognition. Nora looked at the cold fire. She was quiet, too, for a moment. Then she said, Come on. They found Ord at the supply depot, 6 miles east of the hollow. Before noon, a weathered building that smelled of axle grease and dried beans, run by a man who looked exactly like what he was, someone who had been in the same place long enough that the place had grown around him. He was past 60, slope-shouldered, with the careful movements of a man whose body had filed complaints that he'd stopped listening to. He saw Thomas first. His face did something complicated. Then he saw Nora. His face did something simpler, the quick assessment of a stranger, followed by the second assessment that happens when a stranger looks at you like they already know which drawer you keep things in. She had not planned a long approach. She had planned an honest one. "Mr. Ord," she said, "my name is Nora Voss. I think you know my brother. And I think you know that a letter he sent me 8 months ago didn't arrive. And I think you know where it went." He didn't deny it. That, more than anything, told her what she needed to know about him. A man with no conscience denies it. A man with a buried one goes quiet. He was quiet for almost a full minute. Then he said, "I've got coffee on." She told him what she had. She told him what Thomas had memorized. She told him about the 3 pages in her coat pocket, and the federal marshal in Colton, and the specific legal distinction between someone named in a fraud investigation and someone who voluntarily came forward with corroborating testimony. She was not a lawyer. She was repeating things she had read in the one law digest that had sat on their father's shelf her whole childhood, which she had read cover to cover at 15 because there was nothing else in the house. She said it like she was certain, because certainty was a thing she had learned to perform when she had nothing else. Ord listened. He held his coffee cup in both hands, and he listened, and he looked at Thomas once, and then back at her, and she could see the arithmetic running behind his eyes, the same arithmetic she'd watched run behind Decker Hale's eyes, but arriving at a different place, because Ord was not the same kind of man. He had made a choice 15 years ago that had made him part of something. He had kept making that choice, by not unmaking it. But the letter, she watched his face when she mentioned the letter had cost him something. She could see it. He had not destroyed it. That was the tell. He had intercepted it and held it, which was a different thing entirely. It meant some part of him had been keeping it, against the day when he might need it, or when doing the wrong thing had finally cost more than doing the right one. "That letter," he said. "I have it." She looked at him. "I kept it," he said. He didn't say why. She didn't ask. Some reasons didn't need to be said out loud to be understood. He went to the back of the depot and came out with an envelope. She recognized Thomas's handwriting on the outside, the neat slanted letters their mother had taught them both. She did not open it in front of Ord. She put it in the same pocket as the 3 pages. "I'll come to Colton," Ord said. "Not because you've got leverage on me." He looked at her directly for the first time. "Because I've been in this canyon for 15 years, watching men like Harlan Creed grind people down and telling myself it wasn't my business." He paused. "It stopped being not my business a while ago. I just needed a reason to admit it." She looked at him for a moment. She respected the honesty of it, not the clean honesty of someone who'd done nothing wrong, but the harder kind. The honesty of someone accounting for themselves. 2 days, she said. Colton. Federal Marshal's office on the main street. Ord nodded. They rode south. Thomas on a horse, Ord lent them a steady brown mare that didn't complain about the pace. Nora on the borrowed one. The canyon opened up after the first hour, and the land went wide and flat and gold, with the late summer light coming off the dry grass. And the sky above was the hard blue that only happens in high country, and for a stretch of time when neither of them was talking, Nora became aware that she had not looked at anything simply for the looking in a very long time. "You all right?" Thomas asked. She didn't answer right away. She thought about the question. "I don't know yet," she said. "Ask me when we get to Colton." He smiled at that. The side of his face that could still move its full range anyway. "You always say that. You always ask too early." The second morning, 30 miles south, on the long, flat approach to Colton, Nora heard horses behind them. She didn't say anything. She tracked them by sound for half a mile. 2 riders, maintaining distance, maintaining pace, not overtaking, not falling back, following with the patient confidence of people who had done this before. She said, "Thomas." He looked over his shoulder. "Don't," she said. "Don't look back. We're going to turn at the next junction and take the eastern road and ride like we have somewhere to be." He turned back to the front, his jaw set. He did not ask questions. She'd always loved that about him when it counted. He did not ask questions. They turned at the junction. So did the riders. Nora thought for exactly the length of the next straight stretch of road. Then she said, "Take everything I gave you. The papers. The letter. Take them and ride hard into Colton and go straight to the marshal's office. Don't stop anywhere else. What about you? I'll be right behind you." "Nora." "Thomas." She looked at him. She made it the look that meant she had already decided, and the conversation was about timing now, not direction. "Go." He went. She pulled her horse sideways across the road and turned to face back the way they'd come. The two riders pulled up 50 yards out. One she didn't recognize, young, flat-eyed, the look of someone hired for a specific function. The other one was Decker Hale. She had known it would be Hale. She had not known it until just now, but she had known it. He rode forward alone, stopped 20 feet from her. His generous smile was present. His eyes were doing their counting. "Miss Voss," he said, "you told me that letter had everything in it." She had told him the letter was somewhere he wouldn't find it. She hadn't said what was in it. He was a precise man. He remembered precisely what she'd said. "I may have been optimistic," she said. He looked past her at the road Thomas had taken. "Your brother's riding hard," he said. "He has somewhere to be," she said. Hale looked back at her. He was not smiling now in any sense of the word. He had the flat stillness of a man who has made a decision and is simply waiting for the appropriate moment to implement it. She had seen that stillness in the saloon when she'd first named Harlan Creed. She understood now that she had not scared him. She had only made him careful. "You're not going to make it to Colton," he said. "Not in a way that helps you." She kept her horse steady. The horse was better at this than she was. It stood with the enormous patience of an animal that has no position on the matter. She held her voice to the same register. "Mr. Hale," she said. She kept her eyes on him, and did not let them go to the young man behind him, and did not let them go to the road Thomas had taken, or to the distance between herself and Colton, which was now Thomas's distance to close, and not hers. "My brother has 3 pages of memorized testimony in his coat pocket. He has a letter in that same pocket with dates and names and ore weight records. And there is a man named Ord who will be in the federal marshal's office in Colton in 2 days, who has been in this canyon for 15 years and has more to say than anyone else you can name." She paused. "Shooting me on this road helps you with one problem and creates 5 more. And Harlan Creed is not the kind of man who absorbs 5 problems on behalf of someone else." Hale's jaw moved. A small movement. "Creed doesn't know yet," she said. "Does he? That I was in the hollow, that Thomas is free. He's going to find out. And when he does, he's going to have an opinion about how you handled it." She kept her voice completely level. "The only thing that works for you right now is getting ahead of it. Coming to Colton yourself, because the case Thomas is walking into that marshal's office with," she stopped, "it's going to hold. And you can be inside it cooperating, or you can be outside it running, but you cannot be the man who stopped it because that man doesn't get to run." She did not know if he would believe her. She did not know if she had all of it right. She had the Voss habit of saying things as though she was certain, and most of her life it had worked, and right now she needed it to work one more time. Decker Hale looked at her for a very long time. The flat-eyed young man behind him shifted in his saddle. The road to Colton was empty. Then Hale said, in a voice stripped of everything that wasn't the bare transaction of it, "How do I know the marshal doesn't already have my name?" "He might," she said honestly, "but he doesn't have your testimony. There's a difference." Another silence. The dry grass moved in a wind she could feel, but not hear. Hale turned to the young man behind him and said, "Ride back to the hollow. Tell no one we came this way." The young man left. Hale turned back to Nora. "I'll come to Colton," he said, "on my own terms." "Those are the only terms," she said. She turned her horse south and did not look back to see if he followed, because looking back was not something she could afford, and also because he was going to follow and she knew it, not because she had threatened him, but because she had told him the truth, and the truth had left him only one workable option. She was right. She heard his horse fall in behind her at a distance. She rode the last 20 miles into Colton with Decker Hale's hoofbeats, a quiet constant at her back, and she thought about her mother's coat with the coins sewn into the hem, and about Thomas's letters, and about a second letter that had sat in an old man's depot for 8 months, waiting for someone to come and make use of it. Thomas was on the steps of the marshal's office when she rode in. He had made it. His face, when he saw her, had the look it had gotten when he was small, and she'd come back from somewhere he'd been afraid she wasn't going to come back from. She had seen that look enough times to know she was tired of causing it, and not enough times to be willing to stop. She dismounted. She walked to the steps. She looked at him. "Did you give them the papers?" "First thing," he said. "The marshal's inside. He wants to talk to you." He looked past her at Hale, who had tied his horse to the rail and was standing at a careful distance with his hat in his hand. How did you?" "I told him the truth," Nora said. She was looking past Thomas at the door of the marshal's office, which was plain wood with a small paned window beside it, through which she could see a lamp burning on a desk. She told him the truth, she said again, more quietly, as though she was reminding herself, works more often than people think. The marshal's name was Everett Cole, a precise, unhurried man of 50 with reading glasses pushed up on his forehead, and the manner of someone who had heard every possible version of every possible story, and was still capable of being interested by a new one. He shook Nora's hand first, then Thomas's, then, after a beat, Hale's. He listened for the better part of 2 hours. Thomas gave the memorized testimony. Nora laid out the 3 pages and the letter. Hale, after a silence that lasted long enough for Nora to wonder whether she'd miscalculated, began talking, and once he began, he was thorough. The thoroughness of a man who has been carrying weight for a long time and has now set it down, and would like to put as much distance as possible between himself and it. When Ord walked in on the second day, exactly as promised, and confirmed the weight records and named Gerald Pratt, the assay clerk, and provided the name of a 4th man, Nora had not known about a land commissioner in the territorial office who had been filing amended mineral rights documentation for Harlan Creed for 4 years. Marshal Cole looked up from his notes and looked at Nora for a long moment. "You rode 400 miles to find your brother?" he said. "Yes," she said. He looked at her. "How did you know about the Creed connection before you even arrived?" She considered the answer. She said, "I didn't. I saw Hale's face in the saloon when I said the name. That's when I knew." Cole wrote something in his ledger and pushed his glasses back to his forehead and did not say anything for a moment. "Miss Voss," he said, "I'm going to need you to stay in Colton for several weeks, maybe longer. The federal review process for something this size," he gestured at the pages on his desk, "takes time." "I understand," she said. Thomas, beside her, said nothing. She could feel him looking at her. Cole looked at both of them. "You'll need a place to stay. There's a boarding house on the 2nd block. Tell them I sent you." He paused. "And Miss Voss, the work you did to get this on my desk." He stopped. "That's not nothing." She nodded. She did not say what she was thinking, which was that it had started as something she was doing for Thomas, and had somewhere along those 400 miles, and 3 pages of notes, and 20 miles of road with Hale's hoofbeats behind her become something else. Something she did not have a precise name for yet. Something that felt like the beginning of knowing what her life was for. Outside the marshal's office, the afternoon had cooled. The main street of Colton moved with the ordinary business of a town that did not know what had just been set in motion inside one of its buildings. Thomas stood beside her on the boardwalk and said nothing for a full minute. Then he said, "What do we do now?" She looked at the street. She looked at the mountains to the north, which were already starting to show the first cold color at their peaks. She thought about the 6 families Thomas had mentioned, the ones paying inflated rates for water rights on the South Fork that should have been theirs by law. She had not told Marshal Cole about them yet. She had been waiting until she understood the shape of what was possible. She thought she was beginning to understand it. "There's a land attorney in this town," she said. "I asked the woman at the livery when I came in." "Of course you did," Thomas said. "I want to talk to her before the week is out." Thomas looked at her. He had the look he'd had at the campfire, the Voss look, the one that meant he understood what she was actually proposing, which was not small, and was not going to be fast, and was going to require them to stay in Colton for a good deal longer than the federal review process. "All right," he said, just like that. She looked at him. His swollen eye was beginning to come down. He held himself at a better angle. He would be all right. She had known that when she rode out of Abilene. She had known it the way you know things about the people you grew up with, not from evidence, but from something older and less articulable. He was going to be all right, because he was Thomas, and she was not willing to accept other outcomes. The street was getting its evening character, lamps being lit in windows, the smell of someone's supper moving out through a kitchen door somewhere down the block. "You're hungry," Thomas said. She realized she was. She had not been hungry in a conscious way for several days, and now she was, the specific hollow hunger of someone whose body has been running on something other than food and has only just been given permission to notice. "I know where there's a decent restaurant," Thomas said. "The supply runner from Whitmore Junction told me about it, back when I still had freedom of movement. He said it was run by a woman about 30 who'd come out from Kansas City and made something out of nothing." Nora looked at him. He smiled the good side of his face. Something wrong with that? Nothing, she said. She almost smiled. She let it arrive this time, let it sit on her face without stopping it. Nothing at all. They walked down the main street of Colton in the cooling evening. Two people who had come a long way to do something that had turned out to be several things, and who had more to do before it was finished, and who were, for the first time in a long time, not running. Behind them, in a plain office on the main street, Everett Cole was writing a letter to a federal judge. Ahead of them, 2 blocks east, there was a vacant lot beside a land attorney's office, where the ground was level, and the light was good, and the street traffic was steady enough to support a business. Nora did not know about the lot yet. She would learn about it from Ruth Calder, the attorney, on Thursday afternoon. She would stand in front of it with Thomas and look at it the way she looked at everything worth doing, not with longing and not with hesitation, but with the measuring attention of someone who has spent her whole life understanding what a thing needs to become what it could be. She would decide on Thursday. She would act on Friday. But that was Thursday. This was the warm start of a September evening in Colton, Colorado, and Nora Voss walked down the middle of it with $15 less than she'd arrived with, and a coat pocket full of pages that were going to give 6 families their water back. And she was, for the first time in a very long time, exactly where she was supposed to be. Sometimes the bravest thing isn't knowing you'll succeed, it's moving anyway, with $15 and a borrowed horse and love for someone who needed you to show up. Nora didn't wait to feel ready. She walked into the room, told the truth, and trusted that truth was enough. That's something any of us can do, in whatever room we're standing in, for whoever needs us most right now. A small note for you. This story was created and fictionalized by AI, crafted to bring you an entertaining listen, while leaving something genuinely useful behind, a quiet reminder that ordinary courage, offered at the right moment, is rarely ordinary at all.